Hi guys, it's Laurel Ann. You may have noticed that I didn't do a wrap-up in May, so today I'm doing a wrap-up for May and June. There are quite a few books, so I'm going to try and keep it a little snappier than usual. I'm also going to do something a little bit different. Usually I go in chronological order, but today I'm going to kind of roughly order it from the book I enjoyed the least to the book I enjoyed the most. But first, there are two books that, for two very different reasons, I don't feel like including in the ranking, so I'll start with those. First one is Are Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis. I talked about this a bit in my Spring Favorites video. This is Angela Davis's seminal text in which she lays out her arguments in favor of prison abolition. She sort of gives a rundown of other abolition movements and compares them to this concept, saying that even though this may seem totally radical now, or at the time of writing, and still now, these other things that we take for granted, like abolition of slavery, abolition of Jim Crow, were totally radical in their times. She touches on the prison industrial complex and discusses how prisons are basically legalized slavery. I think Are Prisons Obsolete is an absolutely essential text for this moment. Even if you're not sure about prison abolition, she does a really good job of presenting the information and allowing you to draw your own conclusions. I think it offers some new ways to think about police abolition as well, because, you know, we've been hearing a lot about that over the last couple of months. It's also very short and written in an accessible way. So if you're not reading it, what are you doing? I will link a PDF down below. And you can click on it and read it right away. It's only about, I don't know, 200 pages. It's really quick. The other book I just want to touch on briefly is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I had turned to the Harry Potter series for like comfort in this like weird time in my life, and it was just kind of a weird time to start rereading Harry Potter. Honestly, it did not come as a surprise to me that J.K. Rowling is a TERF. I've had this idea for a long time, but the way she has doubled down on it and insisted on disseminating really harmful rhetoric is just something that I can't support, and I really just kind of wanted to rethink how and if I'm going to talk about the Harry Potter books on my channel going forward. You know, they are always going to be books that are special to me. The stories will always be, you know, personal. But I have to say, like, when I was reading the last couple of chapters after she made those original tweets, I kept seeing her stupid, smug face, like, leering out of the pages at me. It just wasn't that pleasant. But also, you know, I've been seeing a lot of conversation about, well, let's pretend that she just didn't write the books. I think that it's not really constructive, in this case at least, to totally separate art and artists, because, let's be honest, like, her harmful views do inform the text. So I think it's much more beneficial to just call attention to these things when you see them in Harry Potter. And I really wanted to do something to sort of like push back against the things that she has been saying. So if you donate to any organization that supports trans or non-binary folks, go ahead and just send me proof of that, either through my email or any of my socials, which are linked below. And I will mail you a hand-painted, watercolored bookmark. If you are looking for some organizations to support, I'm not an expert, but I will leave a few ideas down in the description. I don't know if anybody will actually be interested in that, but if you want a cute bookmark from me, you might as well, despite J.K. Rowling, even though she won't find out about it. That's all. Okay, on to the ranked books. So the first one I'm going to talk about, the one I enjoyed the least, was Black-Eyed Susans by Julia Heaberlin. This is a thriller about a woman who was the only surviving victim of a serial killer when she was a teenager. And we meet her years after this event, just weeks before the man who was convicted of the crime is set to be executed. And she, after years of consideration, has finally decided to help the lawyers and investigators who are trying to set this man free, because they believe that he is innocent. And she does too, which is kind of weird because she just sat on her hands and did nothing about it for all these years. But okay. For dramatic effect, it's just a few weeks before he's going to be killed. She doesn't actually remember any of the events when she was held in captivity or dumped in this field. But she does have reason to believe that the actual perpetrator may still be out there. So finally she decides she can't sit idly any longer. She has to intervene before this man is murdered by the state. I was kind of excited about this. I thought it was kind of a promising premise, but it was not it. I think that the author was trying to elevate the work by trying to do a bit more with the prose than what you often see in thrillers. But it ended up having all these sentences that were really just like overwrought and exhausting and not good. Here is a passage that I feel like kind of exemplifies the level of writing we're talking about. She's texting, I'm sure. This is about the protagonist's teen daughter. She's texting, I'm sure. I pull out from the curb and decide to let her decompress from the 8 fluorescent lighted hours she has spent constructing triangular prisons and deconstructing Charlotte Bronte. And I guess, like, as a turn of phrase, it's kind of clever, but as a sentence in a book, it is just obtuse. And the book is just overloaded with passages like this. I also don't think that was the only issue with the book. The characters are really inconsistent. I never understood their motivations at all. And there were lots of other, like, tiny things that bugged me, kind of cliche kind of things. Like, for example, one of the characters has eyes that change color with her mood, and like...
What white nonsense is this?
So yeah, overall, a pretty big disappointment, and one that I really wish I had passed on. Next is Death Note Volume 3 by Tsugumi Ohba and Takeshi Obata. This is the 3rd volume in the Death Note series, which I've explained twice. I don't feel like explaining it again. You've probably heard of it. It doesn't matter. There was definitely some really interesting stuff in this particular volume, but the series is just really not holding my interest. I don't like the way it deals with women. Sorry, every time I hold a book, I'm like doing this with it, and that's not good. That's not good filmmaking. Who am I? I do think I'm going to read the next couple of volumes, give them a try, because my sister says that I should read at least the first 5 if I've read the first 3. But after that, like, barring some mind-blowing twist, I just don't think I'm going to continue. Next is A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. I wanted to read something by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've only read, what's it called? I wanted to say As I Lay Dying, but that is definitely not it. Oh yeah, of course, Never Let Me Go. I've only read Never Let Me Go, and I loved it, and I was just like, I should read more of him. So I picked this one at random. It's about Atsuko, a Japanese woman living in England whose oldest daughter has recently killed herself. And this tragic event prompts her to sort of look back on the period when she was pregnant with her daughter back in Japan, and reflect on a strange and intense friendship she had with another woman. This book was very strong on atmosphere. It's set in post-World War II Nagasaki, and that was just a really interesting time and place to read about. I sort of see this whole culture on some kind of cusp of something different, and also to see the ways in which these people have this like huge collective tragedy that they're sort of living around and trying not to look directly at as they try and build a new normal. The story really did keep me compelled, and I was really interested in all the characters, but like at the end of the day, I just didn't really get it. Since I finished it, I have read some other people's analyses, and I think I understand what he was going for, but I do kind of think that a book should be able to stand on its own 2 feet thematically, so that just kind of took something away from this book for me. I don't hate that I read it, but I don't know, I'm not going to remember it probably. Next we have On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is about a Vietnamese American man named Little Dog who is coming to terms with himself and his family history. It's told in the form of a letter to his mother, who was quite abusive to him emotionally and physically. That was an interesting storytelling device. I thought it was very effective. I was really excited for this. I really like Ocean Vuong's poetry, but this book, I don't know, I just didn't love it as much as I really thought I was going to. There can be no doubt that the writing in this book is really beautiful. There are some gorgeous sentences and images, but there's just something missing. I almost felt like that beautiful prose almost got in the way. I just felt so emotionally distant from the characters, which is weird because there are a lot of really like powerful emotional things happening, some really heavy stuff, and I just never really connected with anybody, even the protagonist. I do think this book does a good job of portraying trauma and inherited family trauma in particular. And I think that the last part of the book was stronger than the rest. I enjoyed it more, and it tied everything together quite nicely. I do think that this is a pretty special book, and it's worth the read. I really don't want to put anybody off of reading this. It just wasn't quite there for me. Next we have Postcards from the Edge by Carrie Fisher, which I listened to totally on a whim. The audiobook is narrated by Carrie Fisher, of course. It's about an actress named Suzanne who is keeping a diary while she is in rehab following an overdose. We get to meet a lot of these really fun and peculiar characters in the clinic and observe the interpersonal dynamics between them. And then we continue to follow Suzanne in the year of her life following rehab. As she goes back to work, she starts dating again and just kind of tries to build herself a new normal. This is very funny, but it still has a very strong emotional core. Kind of has the vibe of an older Woody Allen movie, except that he would never make a movie about women. I loved hearing her voice. She, of course, was phenomenal. She's so funny. But it was a bit of a bummer, if I'm being honest. Apparently the book is semi-autobiographical, and we all know how Carrie died. There are a lot of scenes where she's displaying really clear signs of mental illness, and nobody in the book seems to recognize them as such. They're just like, oh, that kooky Suzanne refusing to get out of bed for 2 weeks. What are you gonna do? What is she like? And, it's just kind of made me think, if Carrie Fisher had had better support sooner for her mental illness, maybe she would still be with us. I don't know. I obviously don't want to conjecture, but it was a little bit of a bittersweet experience reading that. I didn't know this, but there is a movie with Meryl Streep, and it looks incredible, and I need to watch it very soon. Okay, moving right along to The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is a murder mystery set on a very remote island off of the west coast of Ireland, where our cast of characters have gathered for a wedding. From the beginning, we know that somebody has died, but we don't know who, and we jump back and forth between the start of the weekend and the moments after the body is first discovered. This definitely feels like a bit of an homage to Agatha Christie in the way we slowly discover all of these secrets and connections between these characters. Lucy Foley's last book, The Hunting Party, was one of my biggest surprises of the year, and when I saw that this one was coming out, I kind of laughed to myself a little bit because it's almost comically similar to that one in terms of premise, but it actually was really different. I guess that's not that wild of a surprise. Writers can write things differently. I mean, let's be honest, every Sherlock Holmes book is the same, but different. It's wonderfully atmospheric, it's solidly entertaining, and it's very impressive in that there are a lot of perspectives, but they're all very distinct in terms of characterization, and I never really got anybody mixed up at all. I was also thoroughly surprised by the ending. So yeah, if you like thrillers, if you like mysteries, I think it's good. If you like character-driven stuff, go for it. Next I want to talk about If I Never Met You by Mhairi McFarlane. I first discovered Mhairi McFarlane last year. She writes these really sweet rom-coms about people in their 30s. Romance is not something I am particularly drawn to most of the time, but honestly, I will read anything that this woman puts out. Her characters are so lovable and real, and her writing is truly characterized by that classic Scottish wit that obviously I have a thing for. If I Never Met You is her latest release, and it begins when our protagonist Laurie is unexpectedly dumped by her partner of 18 years. And a couple of days, a week or so after the breakup, she finds herself trapped in an elevator with the office hottie. Then they, of course, hatch a fake dating plan, because what else do you do in a rom-com, right? I personally love fake dating. I think it's so delightful because nobody does this in real life, you know? It just adds a layer of fantasy to an otherwise regular type of book. The romance was really nice. I was really rooting for this couple. It also really well explores the evolving nature of long-term female friendships, and it also examines two really different types of complicated parental relationships. And that kind of thing really works for me. Like, if you're going to really hook me into a contemporary, you need to just give me a little bit more as well. You know what I'm saying? The only thing I'm not sure about with this book is that Laurie is mixed race and Mhairi McFarlane is white. I do think that she took a lot of care with this. She clearly like read about microaggressions, and she, as far as I can tell, did an okay job of portraying that kind of experience. It's in a way that I feel like the sort of I don't see color crowd could digest, and maybe could lead that type of person to kind of re-examine their own actions and the way they interact with people of color. But, like, you know, at the end of the day, it's not own voices, and she obviously can't communicate that experience as well as a Black British woman would be able to. The next book is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. A couple months ago, I got it into my head that I wanted to read the entire Women's Prize shortlist because my Women's Prize is my favorite literary prize. Now that we're in July, I feel like I'm definitely not going to be able to read all 3 of the Thomas Cromwell books. Is it Thomas or Oliver? The Wolf Hall books. That's really embarrassing. Shit. But I'm going to do my best. I'm going to read as many as I can. So this was the first in that project. It was the first one that came available for my library. This is the story of the Trojan War told through the eyes of the women. So quite a lot of this book is just made up really of short stories about things that happened before, during, and after the war. We hear from all sorts of characters like Penelope, some of the goddesses that played a role, and Thessalia, who was the queen of the Amazons, who was killed by Achilles. But between all of these stories, we continually return to the Trojan women in the immediate aftermath of the war. We see them dealing with the loss of their homes and their fathers and their husbands and their sons, and sort of, you know, dealing with the knowledge that they are going to be enslaved for the rest of their lives. It's some pretty heavy stuff, but it was really compelling. I really loved it. So I just realized that the last 10 minutes of my video did not record. So now my battery's low. It's a race against the clock. So the penultimate book for today is How to Be Both by Ali Smith. This is a book in 2 halves. We have George, who is a 15-year-old girl in like present day, who is dealing with the recent loss of her mother. And in the other half, we have Francesco, who is a Renaissance painting who died in the 15th century. And these 2 people are connected through mystical thematic means. As I've said before in relation to Ali Smith, the plot is not the thing. It's all about what's underneath. This particular novel is about dualities and nuance. It's about art. It's about grief and political activism. And I think the most central themes are sexuality and gender identity and expression. Something about this book that I'm just like obsessed with is that each copy is randomly printed with either George or Francesco first. So half people have a different experience from the other half. Personally, I had George first, and I do think it would really change your reading of the book if you had it the other way around, and a few years down the line I definitely plan to read it the other way. I feel like I've sung Ali Smith's praises enough already, but once again I just have to say that I'm totally in awe of what she can do. She has such a masterful grasp on the English language. She has a great sense of humor, and all of her books make me think a lot, and this has got to be my favorite of hers so far. And finally, I've got to tell you about Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This has been everywhere. You've probably seen it reviewed already. It co-won the Booker. It's shortlisted for the Women's Prize, and the praise and the awards, they're all well earned in my humble opinion. If you've not heard by now, this is about 12 people, mostly women, all British, all black or mixed race, and living in different parts of England. Oh, they're not all living it. Someone is actually living in America. I lied. So this is kind of really like a collection of short stories, but all of the people are connected. Some really closely, some are best friends, some are mothers and daughters, and some in ways that may seem a bit more tenuous, but as the novel comes to a conclusion, we see that a lot of these connections are stronger than expected. The way all of these stories came together at the end was so satisfying and even moving. The characters are all so strong and fully formed. They're not all likable. One or two, I would even say, are pretty detestable, but I still felt connected to each one of them. I think that's such a difficult balance to strike, and for me at least, Bernardine has succeeded. There is a moment in the epilogue of this book when one of the characters thinks something along the lines of, it's so easy to forget that there are so many different Englands, and that sort of, for me, is the crux of this book. You know, sometimes we talk about like the black experience or the female experience or the American or British experience as if these things are sort of somehow one kind of homologous reality, and of course that's so flawed. And I think Evaristo has really skillfully used these characters to show that being black, being born female, being British are all, you know, so many different things to so many different people. You know, I would say that this is a must read for 2020, and that's my hot take of the day. All right, so that's it. Thanks so much for bearing with me. I feel like this is kind of a long one. Hopefully next month I'll be back to wrapping up just 1 month at a time. Once again, I will link some petitions down in the description that you can take a look at and sign if you haven't already. Now it's really it. I love you guys. Thanks so much for being here. Okay, bye. I'm getting a very evil look from the cat, and he's like playing with plastic bags, so you may hear a crinkle, and it's the cat if you do. By Takeshi Ohba. Nope, we continuously return continually off the west coast of Ireland.